Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vicki Janowski with the Wilmington BizTalk, part of the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. Thanks for joining us this week. On this week's topic and discussion, we're going to check in with the major project that's been proposed in Southport called Project Indigo. And joining us today are two of the developers that have spearheaded this project and are working through the process with the city right now in terms of its review. So today we're going to talk for the next 15 minutes or so with Chad Paul, who's CEO of Bald Head Island Limited LLC, and Roger Perry, who's the president and founder of East West Partners, a name that might sound familiar to some of our local readers as the developers of River Place in downtown Wilmington. So Chad and Roger, thanks for joining us today and giving us an update. It's been a little while since we've checked in on Project Indigo. So just to start us off, if you want to maybe just give an overview before we get into the weeds about where it stands and some of the things that you're addressing around it, just explain a little bit about what is Project Indigo and the scope of it, the size of it that you're looking at.
Okay, so the history of Project Indigo Phase 2 really goes back 40 years ago. In the early, the Mitchell family purchased Bald Head Island in 1983. My father joined a partnership with the Mitchells to help create Phase 1 of Indigo to include the marina and the original ferry terminal. The ferry operation until 2009 ran out of Indigo Plantation Marina. That original land area was about, call it about 85 acres, 80 acres total, that remained for the marina and the parking lot areas. And they developed at the time, which would have been the largest residential development, which would have been original Indigo Phase 1. Fast forward 2009, we moved the ferry operations to Deep Point in Southport. And the Great Recession hits. And the key factor happened was that Mr. Mitchell passed away in 2013. We continue to assemble land parcels throughout the area. The total site now is roughly, call it 400 acres. During Mr. Mitchell's estate process, instead of just selling the property outright to someone to develop, the Mitchells have had a long-standing relationship and kind of stewardship philosophy, not only with Bald Head, but with Southport. People may not know, but we're probably one of the largest independent employers of Southport citizens, as well as Brunswick County. We're one of the largest taxpayers in Southport and in Brunswick County with our projects that we have, the largest commercial project being the Deep Point terminal facilities, and again, the largest residential development going back to the 80s. And I had a long talk with the estate and the family members, and they said, well, if you think that you could form a partnership that we could all live with for 10 or 15 years with someone that could be a responsible steward, because the Mitchells family was going to migrate out of land development, we're all ears. Frankly, Vicki, I made one phone call. I made a phone call to an acquaintance, a friend of Roger's and mine. And I said, what do you think? And they said, great idea. Let me call Roger. And Roger and I sat down and had a handshake discussion. Oh gosh, now right about 2.5 years ago about the opportunity. And it's a great opportunity to partner with East West and Roger. I think we think alike. You know, he's a Leviathan in the business. I'm learning a lot along the way, and it's been a joy. So what we've got is we've got a partnership. That partnership will purchase the property from the Mitchell estate, and that transaction will happen subject to getting planning board approval. About 15% of the property is currently in the city limits of Southport. The balance of the property is located within county. Notwithstanding, it's still within the extraterrestrial jurisdiction of Southport, but the property lies in the county. So Roger and I have a similar philosophy about stewardship, about the responsibility for Southport, and we've worked hand in hand with Southport to make this fully annexed into Southport. Generally speaking, it would be a shame for this property to be developed in the county and not yet have all access to the urban core and not participate in the tax base on what needs to happen down here. So that's kind of the backdrop. Turn it over to Roger, let him kind of talk about the backdrop.
Thank you, Chad. Vicki, you know, our company's been in the community development business now for about 50 years, and we've tried to be good stewards of and responsible stewards in developing communities that not only enhance the quality of life of our customers, but also the folks who live and work and have been long-term residents around what we do. And that's why teaming up with Chad on such an important piece of property was most appealing to us and exciting to us. And we're enjoying working through the process of coming up with a plan that not only will create the kind of community we're used to creating, but also fit the culture and lifestyle requirements of the people of Southport. So we're very, very excited about it, and look forward to it. This is always the tough period of time trying to find that proper balance, but we seem to be making progress on that.
You both mentioned the process of local review that's going on right now, and I do want to talk about that in a minute to see where things stand. But first off, again, to talk overall about what the proposal is for the project. When you, Roger and Chad, first presented this to Southport was in 2020. You described it as, like you said, Chad, nearly 400 acre at the time. Of that presentation, you're talking about it as a $565 million development that would include single family homes, apartments, townhomes, duplexes, commercial space that seemed to show some retail, some medical. So is that still how you're describing it? Has any of those plans changed since you first came to the city with it a couple years ago?
Yes. And so much of the things like the hospital and the potential assisted living and open space, that's all part of Southport. So when we first went to Southport that fall, they actually requested, would we be willing to hold off our application until the new UDO was passed? And we agreed to do that because that was the right thing to do. So I think that we're the first real big project that's going under the new Unified Development Ordinance. So we delayed our application until November. But what you described, we have stayed with the original vision with what we've anticipated that we presented back at the town hall meeting in 2 years ago.
Can you maybe expand a little bit more on that? What was the change in the UDO or the adoption of that?
The UDO actually was needed for Southport, frankly. It was the older UDO did not have the definitions, did not have the guidance of where the city needed to go and where it wanted to go. And the new one is a more robust document that brings the process into a more state-of-the-art, let's use that word, process, rather than the older process that was, so much of it was ill-defined. So many things have changed in the development world that you couldn't find definitions within the old UDO to address.
Well,
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Well, Chad's exactly right. And, you know, what we try to create are, you know, the buzzword vernacular is new urbanist communities that are a mix of uses and a mix of dwelling types, while preserving sensitive and important parts of the property from an environmental standpoint, plus providing the open space and the community amenities that bring it together carefully as a neighborhood, and try to weave it into the fabric and the character of the land in such a way that it's a seamless development that upon completion, although it still need years to mature, well, looks like it fits the site, fits the location, and has not dramatically altered the quality and character of the property. As Chad pointed out, with sensitive portions of the site, along with open space we've required. 43% of the property will remain in some kind of open space or public use. So there's a great emphasis on creating a sense of neighborhood where people can socialize and enjoy and interact in a community way.
So when you're looking long-term at it, if this is approved and goes through the approval process, how many years are we talking out in terms of developing this, very significantly large parcel?
I think Roger and I have talked, this is a 10 to 15 year type plan. Is that fair, Roger?
Yeah, I think that certainly we would hope we can do it in 10, but looks like we're hitting a rough patch in the economy right now. It might take a little longer.
But first up then is what we've been alluding to, and that is local approval process. So where does the plan stand right now, and what's the next step on it?
So where it stands now is we formally presented to planning board and the board of aldermen at a joint meeting about 60 days ago. The planning board has done a great job in terms of trying to tackle all the components of this, and they broke that up into 4 subcommittees within the planning board. And those subcommittees, we have been meeting weekly with those subcommittees now for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And the plan is to continue to meet with those 3 or 4 subcommittee folks going forward. The planning board has a meeting tonight, a public meeting tonight. This is on the agenda to have discussions. There won't be any vote or anything like that tonight. That won't happen until June or July in terms of going from planning on over to the aldermen. But that's been the process, is literally breaking it down in component pieces. They have 4 subcommittees. Roger can probably, if I get them wrong, 1 is traffic, 1 is infrastructure, 1 is environment and environmental, and 1 is design and character. Did I get all those right, Roger? I think those are the 4.
And there have been other community meetings as well. So I'm kind of curious, what are some of the questions or concerns, issues that you hear about the most from the residents already around there?
Well, it's almost very predictable. Anytime you talk about developing a piece of property that's an infill site where development has already occurred all around it. The people who live there and work in those environments that are existing, their number 1 concern, their number 2 concern, and their number 3 concern is always traffic. And what kind of traffic impacts is this new development going to create for the existing situation as it is now? We have hired the best traffic engineer in the country, and they have done the traffic study, had that approved by DOT, and we're going to make whatever mitigations, or we're going to make the mitigations in the transportation system necessary to where the impact of our community will not long-term change the overall traffic patterns and the traffic workability that they have. The fact of the matter is, in the future, Southport, with or without Indigo, is going to have traffic issues and traffic impacts that it must deal with. We're not going to make those any worse. We're trying very hard to be a part of making their solutions and making the remedies they'll have to provide easier, better, and perhaps more affordable.
And on that, I would tell you, just, having been running around Southport since I was dug the original footers for the entrance to Indigo when I was 15 during the summer. Also, the character is really underpinning behind all of that. I don't want to be there. There's been some recent development that's not within the city limits that those properties were zoned a certain way, and in order for the developer to get the yield that they needed, they have to pursue mass grading, which is basically to level the whole place, every tree. we are not doing that. We are going to follow what Roger has done for 50 years and what we've done for 40 years on Bald Head, as well as the original Indigo Phase 1. No mask rating. We're not going to get into any of that stuff at all. Actually, all the lots, when we turn over the lots and sell paper lots, those lots will not be treed. Those individual buyers will have to go in and do another tree survey on that lot to site their house and situate their house and not take out any species trees. The idea is, just like at Bald Head, to leave as much of the canopy in place. That's the way to do that. There was a developer that owned part of the land that we acquired in the county, and they had a plan approved about a decade ago, again, on the county side, that was, 2,200 residents, I think. And that was a mass grading plan. It's hard for people not to picture what they see up on 211 and on 133 and say, oh my gosh, how can we let that happen? We're not going to let that happen. We're responsible stewards in that regard. That's not going to happen. We're not going to put our name up on it, and Roger's not going to put his name up on something that is going to have those kind of characteristics.
And when you say character, I know that was an issue. I remember that coming up when Meadowmont was being proposed initially in Chapel Hill, and some of the residents there were saying some of the similar things in terms of how it might impact the character of Chapel Hill, the town portion, which is a smaller area. So I'm just kind of curious, Roger, since you went through that, and that was 20 years ago, and that has grown to be kind of like a marquee project. What do you see are some of the same similarities and differences in terms of going through that process with the community there, and in terms of compared to here now? And also, 20 years later, how's that development bared out for that area there in Chapel Hill?
Well, Meadowmont is a good template for what we're talking about doing in Southport. It's very similar in size. I think that the unifying elements between Indigo and Meadowmont will be carefully cited and carefully marshaled, how the land is developed and moved, taking advantage of the natural features and characteristics of the land. But some of the things we believe in are, we do believe in neighborhood and social interaction. All of our streets will have sidewalks on both sides of the street. We'll have, in addition to preserving as much of the existing tree canopy as possible, we'll have unifying street tree elements on both sides of all streets. The majority of the homes will have functional, usable front porches on them. The biggest difference between Meadowmont and Indigo will be the architectural character. The character of Meadowmont is your typical neoclassical Georgian type architecture that you see in Chapel Hill and the central Piedmont, whereas what we'll see in Indigo is a effort to use those design elements that are a part of the architectural fabric of the Southport area. Those coastal double porches, the kinds of trim, the kinds of use of materials, the shapes, the forms, the roof pitches, all of those things. We'll try to bring and utilize those forms into 21st century housing in Indigo, so that we don't want the houses in Indigo to look like they were built 100 years ago, but we want to build them in such a way that they're clear unifying elements to anyone who observes the old and the new together.
And what we did, Vicki, is we have very strict architectural view guidelines on Bald Head, which and what we've already done is we've produced the residential guidelines that will stay with this property going forward. And it has, hey, how a porch is supposed to look. Roger's super sensitive. No porches that aren't at least 8 feet in depth. No garages will face the street. The houses that are along the sidewalks will be pulled forward to the street so that that front porch can be part of the community. But again, no street facing garages. And the architecture review guidelines are as strict or as more certain than those that have been utilized on Bald Head to ensure that, hey, after 10 or 15 years, that the character stays on there. And all of the representative descriptions of the housing and the components of the housing are pictured, and those pictures are from the historic downtown area of Southport.
I'll make one slight addition to that. We actually will have front-loaded facing garages on some of the homes, but in every case, those garages will be pulled back even to or behind the front elevation of the home, so that they do not dominate the street or a predominant feature of the street. We will have no double door garages on the street, or frankly, anywhere in the community. They'll all be single door garages, even in a multi-car garage situation. But we do have it. I would, if I had my druthers, we wouldn't have any, because I wouldn't put garages on smaller homes and mini homes. Unfortunately, the market demands it and insists upon it. So we will have on the more narrow lots, on the smaller homes, there will be some garages on the front, but once again, they'll be pushed back behind the facade of the house.
But the scale and the characters Roger talked about, Vicki, is really about the size and scale of Southport. So people always wonder the scale of Bald Head. Well, the scale of Bald Head is 3/4 scale, and people wonder, why is it 3/4 scale? It's 3/4 scale because everything is sized around a golf cart. So, Bald Head has been electric and been green before green was popular. They've had electric vehicles only for 35 years out of the 40 years they've had it. But the housing and everything in the garages are all scaled around 3/4 because that's the size of a golf cart.
I've never thought about it that way. That's interesting. Thanks. Okay, so thank you to both of you for sharing this update and letting us know what the latest is. Like we mentioned earlier, the City of Southport's Planning Board is slated to meet next month to make their recommendations that will forward on to the aldermen. So the Business Journal, you can keep up to date with those developments and see what happens with the future of Project Indigo, and we'll continue to cover this as it moves through the pipeline. As always, if you want to catch up on previous BizTalk discussions and other news panel talks that we've had, you can go to WilmingtonBizTalk.com, or you can catch up with it on your favorite podcast streaming platform. So thanks to everyone who has tuned in today, and we will be here again next Thursday, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicki.